You are not a perfectionist. You're actually just protecting something. So, welcome to the Inner Child Month, the month of May. And I'm really excited for this month because 6 years ago, during COVID, is when this podcast was born. The inception of Masks Off was born in May of 2020. And can I just tell you that 6 years ago, I barely understood the inner child. I barely had language for what I'm about to share in this episode. Hey, and welcome to Masks Off Inner Freedom for People-Pleasers and Perfectionists. This is a podcast for those who are tired of holding it all together. I'm Kim Gross, your host, and if you've ever felt like you're doing all the right things, but still feel anxious, disconnected, or quietly burned out, you're in the right place. Here we talk about the patterns you don't even realize you're living inside of. Self-abandonment, over-functioning, chasing approval, and mistaking productivity for your worth, and more. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering who you were before you learned to perform, perfect, and please to belong. Each week, we'll slow things down. We'll unpack the nervous system, the inner critic, and the subtle ways that you learned to disconnect from your true self so you can stop living from pressure and start living from presence. This is your space to take the masks off, so let's begin. And if I had the language or I had the understanding, it wasn't really accessible for me. I wasn't able to really fully heal. So I believed for the most part that when I was showing up in my perfectionistic traits, that it was just who I was. It felt like it was very familiar to me. It was the way I always showed up, at least from the age of 10 on. And so I would just think to myself, well, I am a perfectionist. This is just who I am. But the reality is, the truth of it is that these are not personality traits. These are actually protective adaptations, as Gabor Mate would say. Perfectionism showed up for me in so many different ways, particularly whenever I felt like I had to get things right all the time, or I had to get it right in a very short amount of time rather than having a growth curve. I would expect myself to learn something new and get it right. I would tend to over prepare or over function. And even in the beginning of this podcast 6 years ago, I can remember where we would have a guest come on, and in light of wanting to make it be perfect, I would really over prepare to get fully ready for that episode or that interview and feel like I was in this over functioning place. I can remember so many times when I would just show up and acquiesce in relationships. And if a friend wanted to get together for lunch, I was always the one who was driving 30 minutes or so to meet the person. And then it was, where do you want to eat lunch, rather than me suggesting where I want to eat lunch. And the other thing that would show up for me a lot was fixing, rescuing. And if things felt out of control, I would immediately go to a place of trying to feel more in control by fixing. And that showed up a lot with my kids. And if I sensed that maybe my daughter was making some decisions or choices that I was afraid wouldn't work out for her, I would go to this place of over giving advice. I would micromanage. I would feel anxious. I would feel worried. So I would try to just really guide her decisions more than I needed to. The key here is that there was a time when I thought this was just who I was because it was how I always showed up for such a big part of my life. But here's what I want to share with you and really want to hone in on this month is what is our inner child really? You can hear so many people talking about your inner child. And basically, in simplest terms, the inner child is just a younger version of yourself. It's a younger version of you that holds emotional experiences, has unmet needs, and beliefs about safety and love and worth. In more simpler terms, your inner child, she learned what was safe. She learned what got her approval, and she learned what to avoid. So, for example, and I've shared this story many times, and it's also in my book, Free to Be, A Pathway to Inner Liberation, that for me, my perfectionistic tendencies and people pleasing tendencies came online when I was 10 years old. And it was through my fifth grade teacher who was having a parent teacher conference with my mom. And I remember being at this conference. For some reason, I was there. Normally, we're not allowed to be at the parent teacher conferences, but I was there. And I remember Mr. Perillo saying to my mom that Kim is such a pleasure to have in class, AKA, she's a good girl. She doesn't disrupt class. She's a people pleaser. He didn't say those words, but that's really what that means. And then he proceeded to say, he said, Kim is a pleasure to have in class. And she is not working to her full potential. And something just kind of landed in me. Something was kicked up inside me when he said that maybe I need to, what does that mean? That I'm not working to my potential, that I could do better. And I certainly didn't want him to be disappointed in me. So naturally, it was like, okay, I'm going to see if I can work a little harder and get better grades and get more approval. And so that's what I did. I started to apply myself more. I studied more for quizzes and tests, and I started to get really good grades. And then the teacher would put comments on my paper, such as, I'm so proud of you. This is great. This is amazing. You're making so much progress. And all of those compliments just filled an emptiness inside me. It filled a void. That external validation was something that I was craving and I didn't even know it. And so I continued to perform and perfect and please so that I could get the approval and avoid disappointment from others. And I believed that this was going to keep me safe. Before we keep going, I want to take a moment to share something really close to my heart. If you're listening to this podcast
and you're thinking, wow, this feels familiar. The people pleasing, the perfectionism, the constant self pressure. I wrote a book just for you. It's called Free to Be, A Pathway to Inner Liberation, and it's part memoir, part healing guide. I share my own journey of learning how to stop living in victimhood, take off the masks, and come home to myself, but not by fixing myself, by understanding my patterns with compassion. This isn't a book full of fluff or quick fixes. It's honest, it's grounding, and it's for anyone who's ready to live with more peace and freedom. You can find Free to Be on Amazon. And if the book resonates with you, I would be so grateful if you would take a moment to leave a review. Even a few words can really help others to find it.
This was the key for me. And here's the part that no one tells you, that we don't grow out of these patterns. We actually carry them forward. And sure enough, I carried them forward through most of my life. And I can still to this day feel the pattern of perfectionism and people pleasing and the need to control creep up here and there. I can still feel it. At the end of the day, perfectionism just equals protection. So let me just break this down a little bit for you. Perfectionism is essentially, as I said before, it's a strategy to avoid. What are we trying to avoid when we're perfecting? A few things that we're trying to avoid are rejection. Because if I show up perfectly and I do everything right and I do everything the way that you expect me to do it, you won't reject me. We do it to avoid criticism. Again, if we're quote unquote perfecting at everything, doing everything just so, you're perfect at your job. You're crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. You go the extra mile. People are going to be happy with you. They won't reject you. They won't criticize you. And therefore, you won't have to feel disconnected from others. So it is a strategy. People pleasing is another strategy. And this one is to maintain safety, maintain approval. Because again, if you're pleasing and you're acquiescing and you're saying yes, 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 yes all the time, then people are going to think that you are so agreeable, you're so cooperative, and just they're going to love you. Like you're just so amazing because you're saying yes all the time and doing exactly what they want you to do. So there's so much approval there. And then you think, well, then if I'm being approved of and I feel safe and there's this connection, I have belonging. What does control do for us? Oh my goodness, the inner controller. The control or the inner controller is a strategy to create predictability and emotional safety. And this is huge for a lot of us. If you grew up in an environment where there was not a lot of emotional safety or nurturing from your caregivers, and you never knew how the caregivers were going to show up. Maybe you walked on eggshells because one minute your mom might have been very loving and happy with you, and then the next minute she's raging because something triggered her and now she's upset and angry. So that's eggshell environment. Maybe you had an alcoholic dad who would come home after a binge and just be abusive, disruptive, raging. Again, very scary situation for a young child. So the inner controller comes up with strategies to have more emotional safety and more predictability. And so the inner controller is this evolved protector of the inner child. That's what the inner controller does. The inner controller says, I'm not going to allow you to be that vulnerable and feel that unsafe. So I'm going to do all these different things. I'm going to show up in all these ways to make you feel safe. So she steps in, she manages everything. She like micromanages the shit out of things to keep life safe and orderly. And she also keeps you from feeling what it felt like when you felt unsafe before. The inner controller is going to do all that she can to make sure that you don't go back to those unsafe feelings. The way this has showed up for me, well, it's showed up for me in a lot of ways, but one particular area of my life is with health issues. I can remember many experiences and instances as a child where either I was scared when I was sick or something happened to me personally, and I didn't know whether I was going to be okay or not, or something happened to one of my loved ones, like my mom or my dad, when they had a health crisis or a scare. It was very scary and frightening for me. So, throughout the rest of my life, as well as an adult, having a chronic illness of my own, managing a chronic illness, I've had a lot of things come up over the years, many trips to the emergency room, more than I would like to admit to. And so, because of that fear that I have around illness and what could happen, my inner controller goes straight to work. She's hyper vigilant about making sure that I go to the doctor all the time. The minute something shows up, it's off to the doctors. And I learn all the things that I can do to help heal my body. And it's been a big driving force behind my healing. Part of that is actually helpful and good, that I am taking proactive steps. I'm eating better. I exercise. I meditate. These things are good things to do for general wellness and health anyway. But the point that I'm trying to make about the inner controller is the hypervigilance, the way that I am very have to stay on top of it. And the reason that I do that is because there is this underlying fear. It's a different energy that comes up with the inner controller versus just like coming from an adult place where, okay, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to eat well, meditation is good. These are good things for me to do because I feel healthier and I feel better from doing them. The key point is that none of these behaviors or strategies were just random. They are protective. It was a protective measure. What your inner child actually needs is safety, reassurance, emotional presence, to be seen and heard, and to be allowed to feel her feelings. That's why last month was all about feeling your feelings. Your inner controller didn't need to be better. She didn't need to be perfect or perform more. She needed to feel safe. She needed to feel safe. And this is why you and I both, we overthink, we struggle to relax, we feel the pressure to perform and be a human doing, not a human being. We care deeply about what others think, like way too much. And we can tend to feel anxious when things are uncertain. But here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with you. I like to stress for all of us that we're not broken. There's nothing wrong with us. These are just learned behaviors. They're patterns. These are patterns that we are playing out. What I want to suggest is that as a starting point, where do you even begin with this? One is you can start to notice your reactions. And you can ask yourself, what am I afraid is going to happen right now? What am I afraid is going to happen right now? And what does this part of me need? What does this part of me need? And there's no need to fix anything. There's no need to force anything. It's just becoming aware. So once again, 6 years ago, when I started Masks Off, I did not have a full grasp or understanding of what this meant. I was not good at creating inner safety for my inner child. And so, therefore, my inner controller was running the show, driving the bus. And this is where everything began to change for me. And I know that it can change your life too. In the next episode, I'm going to continue to talk about the inner child and how we can create more safety. And we're going to go deeper with this theme, one layer at a time.
As we wrap up today's episode, I just want to say thank you for being here and for taking this time for yourself. If this episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast or leave a review. Even a quick star rating helps more people find this space and reminds the algorithms that these conversations matter. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have a question, a takeaway, or something that came up while you were listening, leave a comment or send it in. Let's keep the conversation going. This podcast isn't meant to be a one-way street. It's meant to feel like a community. If you want to learn more about me, my work, or the ways we can go deeper together, you can visit my website. All the details are there. Until next time, take a breath, take the mask off, and be gentle with yourself. I'll see you soon.